I'd like to inform the public about the location of the Opens Meeting Act posted in the council chamber and accessible to members of the public. At this moment, I'd ask for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Greenquist.
Here.
Arns.
Here.
Webb.
Here.
McCarthy.
Here.
Beckman.
Here.
Jensen.
Here.
Langy.
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
This time, I'd like to have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Your Honor.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
All right, now I need a motion to approve the full agenda.
I'll make
So
a motion.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
That moves us on to the special presentations tonight. Before I start that, I'd like to welcome Scott Cordis tonight. First meeting up here, so we've got a new face here, so we can start picking on him a little bit now. So anyway, moving forward, we have a special recognition of the Norfolk Unified Cheer Team. And I think we've got most of them sitting here tonight. I'm going to read this, and then we'll come up and present this to you, okay? In honor of the Norfolk High School Cheer and Unified Teams, whereas Norfolk High School Cheer and Unified Teams have demonstrated excellence, talent, dedication, and teamwork throughout 2024 and 25 season, and whereas the Panthers cheer team achieved their highest ever placement in the non-tumbling category among the Norfolk Schools Activities Association Class A school, earning a competitive 4th place finish, and whereas the Norfolk High School Unified Cheer Team, formed just last year, has exemplified excellence and inclusivity, scoring the state championship in the Unified Sideline Cheer category for Class A, B, and C, and whereas placing 3rd out of 6 teams in 2024, the Unified Cheer Team demonstrated remarkable growth and determination to finish 1st out of 9 teams in 2025. And whereas these accomplishments bring immense pride to Norfolk's community and inspire future generations of student athletes. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Shane Clausen, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, along with the Norfolk City Council, do hereby recognize and commend the Norfolk High School Cheer and Unified Dance Team or Cheer teams for their outstanding accomplishments and celebrate their 2025 Class A championship victory. I'm going to have a... Councilwoman Sue Beckman is going to come up with me when we give this away. So.
Thank you. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1.
Thank you. Takes a lot of time and dedication. Takes a lot of time and dedication to perfect those cheers, so thank you very much. All right, we're on to the, go ahead, on to the public hearing and related action. At this time, I'd like to open the hearing at the request of Sloan, was it Manoa LLC to consider zoning change from agriculture district to RR on the property addressed at 83739 556th Avenue. Val, I guess we'll direct this to you for the discussion.
Yes, thank you. I'll start this off. So I put this up on the projector here. So the big red outlined area is actually the address that is associated with it. However, the zone change request is only for this southeast corner here, about 6 to 7 acres. You can see there's a house already built here, and if this passes on all 3 readings, then there's the plat that goes with it to make that blue area into 2 rural residential lots. So that is why they're asking to go from ag to rural residential. And I just did a quick measurement here because our intent for rural residential is supposed to be in that kind of last half mile along the ETJ line. And so it is in that about half last mile of the ETJ around the border. And if anybody's like me, I don't really know the county roads. This is First Street, so you're essentially on South First Street. And then to the west is Highway 81. If there's any questions, I don't know if I see the landowner here tonight, but I can certainly try to help.
Any additional questions for Val? For the homeowner here, or the landowner that's here? Any questions for them? Any other discussion from the public? All right. Making a planning report, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on March 4th, 2025 to consider a zoning change from A Agricultural District to RR Rural Residential District on property addressed as 83739 556th Avenue. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the request with a 7-0 vote.
All right, with that, I'll close the hearing and need a consideration of ordinance number 5923 approving zoning change for agriculture district to RR on a property addressed at 58339 or 53739 556th Avenue.
I'll offer for consideration of ordinance number 5923.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion from the public? All right, seeing none, short title, please. Oh, wait, we've got some discussion. If you don't mind, state your name and please sign in. Yes, but we still have discussion.
David J. Hansma. So my only question is, that's 81, so 556th Avenue is west of 81. So is that map reversed? So is north on the top or not?
Yeah, yes, this is county GIS. So you can kind of see this is 13th,
Okay.
this is First Street.
Where's First Street?
First Street is this east line right here.
Okay, all right.
Going up and down.
And the address is, you're looking at the,
This is 556th Avenue.
okay? And the red is what they're trying to rezone?
No, that's the whole piece. They're
Okay.
just trying to rezone this little southeast corner here. I've kind of estimated with the blue lines. So this little piece right here is what they're trying to rezone.
And just to clarify, which road is 556?
South First Street.
No, okay.
Yeah.
What's the crossroad, do you know?
Let me turn on. It is 837th Road.
Okay. Okay, I just know that area really well, and I couldn't explain where you were at versus the map. Now I get it. Thank you very much for your time.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
All right, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5923 carries on first reading.
Seeing no opposition, I'll make a motion that we suspend the rules and pass on second and third.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to pass on second and third. Do we have any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5923 carries on second and third.
All right, on to item number 22, consideration of resolution 2025-14 approving the final plat for Shalom, is it Minowick? Minowick LLC addition.
I'll make a motion for consideration of resolution 2025-14.
Second.
All right, we have a motion second. Any discussion? Any discussion from the public? All right, seeing none, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, resolution 2025-14 is adopted.
All right, we're on to our regular agenda now. Item number 23, consideration of ordinance number 5924 enacting chapter 14, article X, division 3 of the official city code in order to prohibit camping and the storage of personal property in parks and on other public property.
Your Honor, I'd introduce ordinance 5924 on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion to second. Discussion, please. Danny will direct this to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So as I'm sure most of you recall, late last year was the first time that we introduced the earlier iteration of this ordinance. And this ordinance came from some concerns late last summer, last fall, with individuals sleeping on the south side of the library. And there were some safety concerns, some sanitary concerns. In the last couple of years, there's also been a couple of incidents downtown where there's been individuals sleeping on benches and in public spaces. And it's caused some concern, both for, again, the public safety, the sanitation piece, but also for the safety of these individuals that are sleeping in public spaces. So when we first introduced this ordinance several months ago, there was a lot of conversation around it. What followed that original ordinance was a lot of conversation between city staff, elected officials, and community organizations that are involved with mental health, addiction, some of the things that can often follow homelessness. And so we had some really good conversations with a number of them. And during that time, it also, one of the things that was brought to our attention is the concern that we had introduced this ordinance at a time where we were just going into the winter season, and there were concerns for where these individuals would go. So around those conversations, that's where the warming shelter came about. And the warming shelter, it started up sometime, I think it started in January, right? And the end date for that is it has to be closed by April 1st. And so I know that some of those entities that were at the table earlier are having conversations about a more permanent solution. As the temperatures, increase, we still want to move forward with getting something in place to protect the public spaces, the investment that the city has made, especially in recent years. and the safety of citizens and, the general public, of course. So what follows is, what's before you right now is a new draft of the anti-camping ordinance is kind of what we've called it. And the biggest change within this ordinance would be the shift from something that was seen as meant to penalize in nature. We've transitioned to something that's really focused on a definition here of homeless service provider. And those are organizations that, I'll just read the definition. It says, homeless service provider shall mean any recognized community organization skilled and experienced in services to the homeless and associated human services. So we have a number of organizations in our community that do have the experience needed to help some of these individuals. Sometimes they're in crisis. And so we, first and foremost, before, penalizing them or putting anybody in jail or anything like that, we want to help. We want to help people, and our public safety teams really want to do that as well. And so first and foremost, any time there would first be contact between one of these individuals and a law enforcement officer, the goal would be to connect them with the resources available, with people that are experienced with homelessness. Maybe they need a bus ticket. They came here, they need to get elsewhere. They don't have the financial mechanism to do so. Maybe they need some help with addiction. Maybe they need someone to listen. I think so. This approach really takes in some of the real human concerns that some organizations brought to us after our last iteration, and so it makes it so that eventually there could be a fine, but that fine it starts at $5. And so first and foremost, the goal is to connect people with homeless service providers. But if there's repeated contacts between our law enforcement officers and individuals, and maybe there are public safety concerns, then at that time we'll have to go down the route of fines and looking at trespass violations and things that could be more serious. So that's what's before you right now, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think that's a perfect example of introducing an ordinance that was unanimously supported by the council. However, there was a group of concerned citizens and council members for that matter, and we're able to work together and get through it and come up with this ordinance we see before us today. So I think it's a good example of things when the community gets out and works together and tries to come together and make good things happen, so.
Right, we had a lot of different people and different opinions and different personalities at the table for a lot of the conversations that led to the warming shelter. And I think with so much negativity, it was really cool to see how county officials and city officials and nonprofit organizations and citizens that are here in the audience tonight, everybody came together to recognize that these are people that we're talking about, and we want to make sure that whatever we do is good for citizens, but also good for these human beings. So it was a really good thing to watch, and I think it reflects well on a lot of our leadership in the community.
All right, any other questions or discussion? Any discussion from the public? Short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to enact Chapter 14, Article 10, Division 3 of the Official City Code in order to prohibit camping and the storage of personal property in parks and on other public property, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
All right, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5924 carries on first reading.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and waive this second and third reading.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second, in discussion. All right, seeing none, please vote.
All council members voting on the affirmative, ordinance number 5924 carries on second and third.
All right, we're on to item number 24, consideration of resolution 2025-15, establishing a Citizens TIF Advisory Committee to serve and as advisory capacity to the mayor and city council on matters related to tax increment financing.
Your Honor, I move consideration of resolution 2025-15.
Second.
All right, I have a motion, a second. This opens it up to some discussion. I guess we can direct our staff will answer questions as directed, so. Any discussion? Any discussion from the public? I'm sure you know this, but you need to sign in and state your name.
I will do that
All right.
gladly, Mayor. You don't
Now
even
you can
have
say what
you
you
don't even
want
have
to it.
ask
Andy, now
me.
you can say whatever you want.
I'm not going to quite go that far. But I do have some comments for you tonight. So I want to preface this by stating that I'm not opposed to essentially the creation of a committee to study this. I'm pretty neutral to that. I think most of my comments revolve around the policy itself and some other comments that I have that I wrote down for you tonight. So bear with me. Thank you, Mayor Clausen and members of the City Council. I want to share some of my thoughts on this topic with you this evening and provide some additional perspective. Then Council President Clausen and I discussed the need for a community understanding of tax increment financing over a year ago. Initially, we discussed a means to educate the public and understand what TIF is and how it is used and structured. The conversation began as a community forum, a town hall conversation with speakers. I think we talked about that, Mayor. Developers, attorneys, and maybe even state senators to talk with the public. The public would have been able to ask questions or just listen to the overall discussion. Somehow, over the last year, this goal of the mayor's has evolved into a committee or council to lead the discussion and hold meetings for the public, and then evolved again into a council to develop a policy for the city. First, and with all due respect, I disagree with the policy. The community development law is written and designed to prove the need for TIF. Provisions such as meeting the but-for clause ensure projects requesting tax increment financing do in fact need it for the project to happen in the first place. Creating a policy of any kind would significantly undermine the council's ability to look at each project on its own merits. Developments are all unique. Examples include different areas of town, different topography, and utility capabilities. Furthermore, the type of redevelopment projects being proposed are going to vary greatly in terms of their financing models and uses of TIF. I'm always going to be a believer in the City Council's ability to deliberate and act on complex matters. Secondly, I appreciate the need for a group of good citizens to be actively involved in a big topic like community redevelopment. However, if we're talking about utilizing this group to become educated on TIF and in turn educate or advocate for it, I think the City Council should first and foremost become educated on TIF and the provisions of the community development law. Perhaps a work session could be held that would function more like a community conversation, such as the original concept I mentioned moments ago. Such an event would allow the public to attend, listen to speakers, engage with elected officials and others, and comment on TIF or any other matter being discussed. The Norfolk Daily News has hosted and moderated such events in the past, covering topics such as Norfolk's future, local property taxes, and recruiting and retaining young professionals. And I would imagine the Daily News would be more than happy to host or even sponsor a community conversation on tax increment financing. And third, regardless of what happens this evening as far as TIF Council, the Mayor and City Council should permit projects to keep moving forward and continue accepting and reviewing redevelopment plans, whether it is for a privately funded blight study or a redevelopment plan for a new project. I urge you to keep Norfolk open for private investment. This investment in our community is vital to our future, both in terms of population and workforce retention, service enhancement, housing, retail, or industry growth. Local and non-local developers take big risks in Norfolk because they believe in the strength of the community. I urge you to make sure it stays that way. And we do not hold up development waiting for a policy. Finally, I want to say that I, for one, respect your roles as elected leaders of the community. I trust in you to collectively make wise decisions on TIF projects, the budget, financial planning, community and economic development, and seemingly endless topics that make their way before you. Don't abdicate your decisions, even on a recommendation basis, on one of the only tools we have to sustain our future. Rural communities have to work much harder to retain, much less gain people, and we need to advocate for ourselves. Nobody will do it for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Any other discussion?
David Jans, my only question is, do we not trust the citizens to establish a committee? We're not qualified to help make a decision to the council? I think it's important to get the community and citizens involved, especially if they're interested in doing it. Because bottom line, it's about us, you, and the whole community. So I think it's a great idea. There can always be input from everyone, but I think everybody needs to look at this openly for the improvement in the right direction for this community.
Thank you. In-
Jim McKenzie, Mayor and Council, I appreciate your entertaining this ordinance to create this committee. Just in response to a couple of the comments that were made, the council will be able to attend every meeting. They will be public. We encourage the council to attend every meeting. I think that's a great way to learn. I don't think one open house or one forum is nearly enough to really fully understand tax increment financing. So I think it's going to be several meetings. There will be a lot of learning by everybody, the council, the community, the committee itself. I think it's a great opportunity for the entire community. One other thing that I would just add is, property tax dollars also have to be protected. We have to strike a balance between development and a balance between the use of citizens' property tax dollars. And that's critical for us going forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hey guys. I need a pen. Thanks. Troy Wyrick. Okay. So anyway, thanks for the council, thanks Mayor, everybody for your time. One of the things that's obviously been very controversial in town is tax increment financing and TIF financing, and really the understanding of it. I feel like it's a really powerful tool. I feel like it's not understood, and maybe it's not always been used the way it should, and one thing we really, as a community, have not celebrated our victories a lot. I mean, there's been some successful TIF projects, Hy-Vee East and Meadow Ridge and several of them, and I would guess the average, citizen probably doesn't even realize that those were TIF projects anymore, especially Hy-Vee East, I think. And so there definitely needs to be a better understanding. I'm kind of involved in this at request with this TIF committee, and I don't want to be involved in anything that is to kill projects or to prevent growth, but likewise to just rubber stamp everything through. So we want to put some, I think that if put together properly, this can serve a good role in protecting TIF into the future, because if we continue to go down the road, projects over the last 10 years, 15 years or whatever, there's less and less public support of these projects. And if you continue to go down that road, at some point, we may as a community lose the ability to use TIF at all, and then lose that tool. So just maybe some guardrails and different things, but that's my thoughts. So thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Stephen Romikers with Granville Custom Homes in Columbus, Nebraska. We also have, I'm a home builder first and a land developer, sort of out of necessity. We develop land in Columbus and in Norfolk. Some projects we've done have been, we built most of the homes, single family homes that NeighborWorks did as a TIF project, I think called Norpark. We built 24 of those. I think we built 24 of those 28 single-family homes. 2 were built by another developer and 2 are not built. We also did College View, which was a market development, College View Fifth or something like that. It's on Sheridan. That was probably in 2018, 2019. We built a lot of homes over in Meadow Ridge when J. Paul McIntosh had developed those single-family lots. We bought a group from him and developed those. Also, we're developing and building in Blackberry Heights, which is it's like north of Skyview on the same section of land as Lutheran High. We started building in Norfolk in 2015. Way back in a former life, I was an attorney, worked at the esteemed law firm Jewel Collins, DeLay and Gray. I think they've kind of disbanded and gone different directions, but I had the privilege and great experience of living in Norfolk at that time, playing football for the Norfolk Thunderbirds, playing CDs on the radio with Mike Flood. He was in my firm at the time, so we had a lot of fun. I have family in Norfolk. I love the community. So in 2015, we were encouraged by folks who lived up here that I knew to come up and do some construction. And so that's how we got our toehold here. Our company also grew into land development. And in Columbus in 2016, for the first time, the city embraced the use of tax increment financing. And we've done about 1,000 units, not my company, but in Columbus, about 1,000 units as a result of using tax increment financing for single-family and multifamily development. The city in Columbus has done a really good job of, and city staff, it starts there, has just done a great job of, you might bring a project in and they say, that's not gonna fly, that's not what we're looking for, that ground is, has other viable uses or would work as market rate housing, things of that nature. So that's generally the first screening process. And then, of course, you have to go through the Economic Development Council, which usually consists of a subset of the either the Planning Commission or the City Council. Then you've got to push it forward through the public hearings. So there's no rubber stamp on these things in the communities where we have worked. In Norfolk, we have brought proposals for projects to city staff under when Mr. Colvin was still the city administrator, and we've just been given a flat-out cold shoulder to them at times. So the city, the impression that this is a sort of a rubber stamp on projects isn't true. The city has done a good job of focusing on what the city's needs are. Often that's multifamily and small lot, single-family projects. Now I'm in the residential construction, so I can't speak to the commercial stuff, but we've used TIF on projects that we wouldn't otherwise develop if it weren't for the carrot of the tax increment financing. And they've been successful, but they're not always successful. The single family housing is the most difficult piece to develop, because when you're developing multifamily housing and you can factor in TIF into your pro forma, you know you're going to build that structure, okay? So your risk is some market risk about getting your vacancies filled and maybe your construction risk of cost increase and things of that nature. But at the end, you know that TIF's going to be there because you know you've improved that land and you personally have developed the incremental taxes that you're used to paying down your debt. In the single family, that's not the case. You're building a lot and you're fronting all of those funds, or you're borrowing all those funds against future TIF revenues. But unless that single family home gets built, those revenues don't occur. And therefore the risk in single family development is extremely high. That's why you often see it used more, I believe, in the multifamily sector than in the single family sector. In fact, I know that Legacy Bend has been one of the, look, I'm watching from afar, right? I don't necessarily have a dog in this fight, but unfortunately I do. I'll get to that. But you know what I believe happened at Legacy Bend is it's not necessarily, things aren't necessarily economically viable even with tax increment financing. All tax increment financing ultimately does is pays you back for the infrastructure that you already paid for. That's it. It's not some free-for-all. If you don't build it and get the people to come and get the tax revenues to occur, there's nothing. You're left holding the bag. So to somewhat fast forward to my dog in this fight In 2022, the city of Norfolk, on their own, did a blight study called someone might have to help me, but I think it's like the West Highway 275 Phase 2 blight study. And there was a piece of property in that blight study that I thought would make some sense because it, one, was a dog of a property, but two, it would do well with, small lot development. And small lot development on its own is going to only be conducive to the low end of the new construction market. So it's sort of self-evident what's going to happen there. So we purchased that property in 2022 after the city had included it in their redevelopment plan. But in 2022, interest rates doubled and then doubled again. And it was really a rather difficult time to be building single-family homes. So that project got put on hold. Well, fast forward to today, we're in a little bit better position where we feel we might be able to sustain the risk that's there. So we're going to put in a petition for a TIF project, 24 small lots over by the Shepherd of Peace Church on 35th Street, just north of that. And we're going to put that petition in prior to the election. I was told, hey, you need to just wait because things are, there's a lot of talk on TIF right now and it's probably largely misunderstood and we're not sure what direction this is going. So I said, fine, I don't want to put people in an uncomfortable position. I'll wait. Then I submitted my application for this TIF project in December of 2024, and it's been absolute crickets since then. At that time, I had a infrastructure company, Rutchins, that had done a project for me in Columbus, and they said, yeah, if we go in the spring, we'll honor all of our 24 pricing. Just that simple of a delay has probably cost me 5 to 7% on that project. Now the city's bringing sewer and water along there, which we're going to get assessed for. So the longer that thing sits, the more of an albatross it becomes, and less it can move forward with the TIF project. If it doesn't move forward with the TIF project, I think I'm the third developer to own the thing. It's going to continue to sit until some solution comes forward on it. So without speaking to your potential TIF policy, and I'm welcome to take questions as to that, but without speaking to that, I would like that whatever you do this evening, that you would allow my petition to move forward on its merits, predating this potential TIF policy. That is my ask. I'm willing to speak on anything else you guys might be interested from a developer perspective. I will tell you, if you put a committee together, I wouldn't expect a bunch of developers to show up and help, because as a developer, I'm just going to sit back and wait. I will go somewhere where it's a little more conducive to invest if I didn't have a dog in the fight, right? If I were just a developer looking at this from afar, I'd say let Norfolk do what Norfolk's going to do. They'll shake it out however they want. But I'm afraid you're not going to get a lot of voices from the development community. You might get voices from the folks who are like custom home builders and others who probably, don't either have too much interest in it, or if it's development that's not favoring them, maybe they're not so in favor of a TIF project. I don't know where that's going to lead for you folks. But I would like to stay out of the fray. I would like my application in particular to be heard. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll ask you one. You spoke about Columbus and building in Columbus. What guidelines have you had to follow in Columbus that they have on their TIF?
There are no guidelines. They want to see the but-for equation. Would you move forward with this project if you weren't funded by TIF? A lot of times the but-for is sort of self-evident. City staff does a very nice job because they know they will get political blowback if they're doing things that don't make sense. And then you have to put this in front of the planning commission, and then you have to put it in front of the city council. And then there's public hearings at each one of those stages for the public to be involved in that conversation. So I can't say most. For my experience prior to what's been going on in Norfolk, and I think maybe I'll let you guys work that out for yourselves, but TIF's been a very good tool, and it's about the only economic development tool that cities have available to them. I would venture to say it's nearly zero risk to the city. There's no investments on their part. There's no tax revenues lost unless the developer goes out and builds the vertical structures and creates tax revenues. So in a sense, cities have realized we're fighting over taxes that don't even exist unless these projects take place. A lot of the projects get paid back a lot sooner than their pro formas might indicate if they're successful. So then you're talking about bringing a piece of property that wasn't potentially going to get developed or get developed with a, more dense housing, for example, than would have otherwise happened. And they're actually bringing properties onto the tax rolls. It's sort of, I wouldn't say counterintuitive because it's easy for me to see, but you're increasing the tax base when you increase the development.
I think my follow-up would be that some of the concern in town is a developer getting tax increment financing, and how is that passed along to the end buyer, especially in single-family housing? How do we ensure that that is passed along?
It's probably not passed along in full. I mean, there's tremendous risk in developing that in the first place. So in large part, it's the carrot that makes it worth the effort. Because if you look at the downside risk, if nobody shows up to buy those homes, there are no revenues. So usually in the areas we've developed, I would call it the carrot that's brought us in. Obviously, when you're building small lot, single family, there's market pressure to put those things at an attainable price point. And if those new construction homes don't exist in the market, then the folks who come in and buy it are, by definition, benefiting from the fact that the project exists. Any other questions?
Could you maybe expand on when you say the community has zero risk? We're told that, but I don't think I think there's misconception of how that zero is portrayed.
Yep, there's no investment by the city of Norfolk or city of Columbus or any other city in these TIF projects. They lose potential tax revenues in the future, but those tax revenues will not be generated if these projects aren't built. So their loss is something that doesn't exist from the beginning. No investment whatsoever, none. The developer carries all of the risk, or his bondholder, but of course the bondholder is going to have recourse against the developer. On small lot, single family, you can't just sell lots, because in that price point of home, those buyers aren't of the type that have the means, the time, the experience to come find a builder, purchase a lot, go through some sort of custom build design. They will most likely only build on those lots if the home is built on those lots. If it's basically a speculative project, which takes the risk 4 times higher than the original risk of just the infrastructure. So what does the city lose? I think city revenues are like 18% of the property tax that they use for city services. So what the city loses is that in the future, while those taxes are off the tax roll, they're going to have to provide services to those properties. But if you look at the allocation of the city's overhead and the incremental services provided for that one particular street, I would guess in that instance it's extremely minimal. Right, one police call or fire call or whatever, on 24 lots, if it's not going to be a lot. But then ultimately, one, they get all the sales tax from the construction of that project, day one. 2, when the TIF revenues pay off the TIF bonds, all that stuff goes back on the tax roll. So if you've got an apartment dweller that moves into a single-family new construction home that's on the lower end of the market, that apartment dweller was not paying property taxes. They were not paying. They don't have the opportunity to get into a home, right? Maybe the affordable home, which is already being lived in, that buyer steps up to something that's new construction, that's attainable. Now you've got a new property tax payer. So overall, it's going to increase the tax base. It's going to make more citizens of Norfolk or Columbus taxpayers. It's an expansion of the tax base. Now, it's a policy tool. If you guys choose not to use it, again, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had the great misfortune of having relied upon the city's blight study, which to me is an invitation to come in and develop and invest in Norfolk, Nebraska. And now that policy is rapidly, potentially shifting, or it's going to be a new policy that emerges built by a committee of a group of folks pro and a group of folks con and trying to build a horse and might come out with a camel. So my first ask is that my TIF ask predate this policy potential. You're still going to get all the public input, the staff input.
Steve, we can't act on anything tonight as far as that goes, but we can, we can have that discussion as far as coming forward with your development. But as of this body right now, we can't act on that decision tonight because it's not on the agenda, but.
I can't find someone who can act on it, so I guess I'm asking for
Yeah,
help.
right, I understand where you're coming from.
So, my question would be, and not on your particular project, but just in general, what are your thoughts on guardrails for things like deed restrictions and stuff so that we can ensure people aren't speculating in rental housing and that we're actually getting it to the people who want to stay and make an impact in Norfolk?
Well, I would say it sounds like a solution in search of a problem. I think the more you complicate the very simple tool that is TIF, the very, very simple tool, the only tool you guys have in your toolbox, the less development you will have in the city of Norfolk.
So you think a 5-year deed restriction is going to restrict development in Norfolk? Is that what you're saying? I'm just asking, just to follow up.
Yeah, so I would have to, I guess if you're asking about specifics, go ahead, what do you say, what do you got in mind?
Well, I'm thinking, just what I said, a 5-year deed restriction where we have to ensure that this house is purchased for non-speculative there's all kinds of ways we can form it, but my ultimate concern would be you build 24 houses and I have somebody walk in and buy. We have 24 people who buy them and not one of them lives there. They rent them out. All we did then was increase rentals, really, instead of the ability to attract new people to Norfolk who want to buy homes.
So would I agree to an owner-occupied clause? I mean, I would in my particular project, sure.
Thank you.
Steve, what's some challenges you faced with the Norfolk development? As far as what was proposed originally versus what was done?
So Norpark?
Yeah.
I didn't develop Norpark.
You didn't develop any of the homes
no.
there, 24 of those, you said?
I built them.
Yeah.
So.
How does that, can you
People get a
explain
little
that?
confused on that too. There's the developer, that's the guy who took the TIF. In this case, it was NeighborWorks. And then NeighborWorks, being a nonprofit, wanted to entice, of course, they didn't want to take the build risk, right? So they reduced the cost of their lots dramatically, which enticed myself to come in and take a risk on them. So I came in and took all the build risk. And it worked. I think we got out by the skin of our teeth, but it worked. So it worked well. And now it offloaded all the risk, that NeighborWorks would have had as the bondholder because they took a builder like myself who had the capacity to get out there and get product out there. So it split the risk, really. But I had a long conversation with NeighborWorks this afternoon about repeating that situation, and that's not there anymore. So I'll have both sides of the risk. I'll have the development risk and the build risk on a project like I'm proposing.
You had quite a bit of risk there. I know that I think you had a couple houses that had birthdays on that particular development. That's a bad place to be when you're a developer. As soon as they have a birthday.
There were projects that we treaded water on.
Well, I think, thanks for coming forward tonight. I'm not trying to cut you short, but
No, it's
thanks
fine.
for coming forward. You've given us a lot of good information. This is all information, I hope, is able to be presented in front of the TIF committee if it's voted on and approved. I stuck my neck out on the line here to help form this or go along with forming this particular group. So I hope the intentions of this group are, and I'm sure they are, but I hope that would be the intention, and hopefully to come together as an informed advisory committee that can make good decisions for Norfolk moving forward on what that policy looks like. Now, obviously, they're going to suggest policy that's non-policy. They can't create policy, so the policy will have to come back in front of council and be looked at again. I mean, just on how this will work out in the long run. But so yeah, I'm optimistic that it can be done in a positive manner.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Steve. Anyone else?
I didn't know we were going to get into the weeds on this, but I just wanted to follow up on a few things. There was a comment made that the city has no risk. We do have risk. The city, the county, the schools, everybody else provides services to those new homes. And they will provide those services for no new tax dollars for 15 or 20 years. Therefore, somebody has to pay for those services. It's not free. You can say, well, it's just incremental cost. Every piece of property in this community pays property taxes to deliver those services. They have to contribute those property taxes to deliver those services. And when you have a group of homes that don't provide any property taxes, and yet they're getting those services, somebody's paying for those services. And that's the rest of the citizens of the community. And so we have to strike a balance. Is that development so important that the rest of the citizens are willing to pay extra to provide services to those tipped homes? Some cases it might be true. Some cases it might not be true. So those are the things that we have to understand, and I didn't want to get into the weeds tonight, but since there were some things that I just wanted to clarify that, and we talk about it as a tool. Well, other communities, for instance, Fremont, tips 0 residential, 0. So how are they doing that? And how do we compare? Those are the things we want to look at to understand what we're doing. Are we doing the right thing? Are we making all the right decisions? And just bring all that to light so that at least we know for sure what we're doing and we're making the best decisions. And the citizens understand why we're making those decisions. Thank you.
I would ask the members of this committee that were selected and put on the committee, all of you have opinions of TIF currently right now, right? We've all got an opinion on how you feel TIF's supposed to be used. I really encourage you to go, when we start these meetings and we have educational process in this, that you come to the meetings with a very open mind and not have preformed opinions on what you feel about TIF, because otherwise it's not going to work. You've got to come to it with an open mind and just learn what the experts are telling you and how it works for your community and how this thing looks like when you make the suggestions for our policy. That is a policy that's going to work well for Norfolk. So I just encourage you to do that. And I stayed away from the selection process of this, just simply because I knew if I had gotten involved, it wouldn't work, because everybody would say, well, these are just people Shane wanted to select and put on here, and I just hear it now. Those are all Shane's cronies. And so I stayed away from it. I'm hoping, really am hoping, that everybody can come to this with an open mind. Be open to suggestions. Steve had some great comments tonight. That's what you heard tonight from Steve is the mind of a developer. This is what they go through. This is the risk they take, and there's not many of them. There's a few sitting here tonight. I can look out in the audience to see them. But there aren't many people out there that want to take this risk to build these homes. I appreciate Jim's comments. Jim's got his opinions on how TIF should look, and I'm not saying anything Jim says is wrong. I'm just saying we have to have that open mind going into this. Otherwise, if you come in with a closed mind, it's not going to work, and we were probably better off not even trying to put this together. So I just really do ask you to do that. I feel like this could be extremely informative for the public also. This group of individuals actually requested on their end to make sure they're open meetings. I thought that was good. That'll allow other citizens to show up to these meetings and be informed. It'll allow developers, I think, to have an opportunity to be there at those meetings. Maybe they don't want to be, but I would encourage you to be there. Some of the best conversations I've had about TIF are with people who have went through it, and you hear the risks they had and the losses they took, and sometimes they have a good one, sometimes they hit one out of the park, sometimes they don't. But and sometimes they're right in the middle of their project, and you get to hear what the downfall is from trying to develop in a community of just 26,000 people. We're not a huge community by any means. In some of these bigger communities, it's a lot easier to go into because you have the demographics that can sit down and afford your properties. Even now, when we call workforce housing, what we call workforce housing only fits into a small demographic of the city of Norfolk that can actually afford those. So it's a tough little thing to look at. It's a very complicated deal. But I think moving forward, this can be a great tool for, Andy, you brought up newspaper and educating the public. Open meetings, these are gonna be open meetings, have an opportunity for the newspaper to be there and inform the public of what is being talked about, who's talking about what, and how these policies work in other communities, how it's worked in Norfolk so far. Steve, you brought up the fact that Columbus has built 1,000 homes, or 1,000 units, right? I think that's what you said. Norfolk's we've had 1,100 units built. I believe of those 1,100 units, about 90% of those have been utilized TIF to build those. So it is a big tool for our community, and as far as with economic development goes, I would imagine that I'm probably on the very far side of the spectrum when it comes to TIF. I do personally feel that it is a great asset for a community. It's one of the only development tools you have. But I also understand the need to have community input and where the community feels this needs to go. Because if you don't, I don't know who came up here and spoke on it, but I think it was Troy. He talked about the possibility of it just going away. And I think that's a real possibility within the city of Norfolk right now. So we put a tremendous weight onto these individuals. They're going to have to spend a lot of time and their own time, to be part of this group and hopefully suggest policy that work for our community moving forward. So that being said, any more discussion?
Mayor, I'd like to piggyback on something you said right away is, to get your name on this list I think is a success in its own. I guess of those that are maybe in the crowd tonight that are on that list of 12 would be willing to speak on what TIF means to them, and so we kind of get a full feel as we're going to vote on this where these individuals may be on their understanding of TIF and how, and if they are an open mind, and you said that, Shane, and keep an open mind into this. So if anybody that was on that list, I'd be really curious and interested to speak or to hear what you have to say.
Troy Wyrick again. I don't have an agenda as for TIF. I want to protect the ability to use it on the right projects. I want there to be a better understanding for the public of what it is and what success looks like. There's more than just property tax, as our builder friend had mentioned. There's the sales taxes. There's an ROI on every single project. And what is that return on investment? There's TIF that we're asking the citizens to, in some way, subsidize services for a while, and how do we protect to make sure that ultimately that's a good return on investment? Because ultimately, if we don't grow, we're going to die. I just feel like that there's projects that, if put in front of a public vote, Hy-Vee East, Meadow Ridge, would have passed 70-30 back in its day. And I think there are projects now, if put in front of a public vote, would fail at the same rate. And so over the last while, I think that some project, that we just need a little guidance. Even if the city were to just have what's our goal? What do we need more of? The project that the builder had spoke on, his projects, that what he's going through is, as a business owner, I hate to see somebody that, is kind of caught up in the middle of that. He's trying to do something that he thinks is good, that makes business sense and things as well. So there's a lot of sides to this. So when you asked my thoughts are, I just want to protect the ability, all sides, growth, the developer, the city, the end user, and really get rid of maybe some of the animosity and the negativity of using TIF as a tool. and maybe a better understanding. There are projects that I didn't know a lot about, and as I learned more about them, I understood them a lot better and would be more supportive than my first instinct from outside and from hearsay. So I don't want to be a part of this group if the goal is to kill every project, and I don't want it to fast track every project either. It's really to look out for all sides and try to put the best policy, the best plan together. And again, ultimately, all we are is, all this group would be is just advisory. Ultimately, it's up to you guys to decide what gets done and doesn't get done. Our job is to maybe if we can take a project that's 60 or 50-50 project and make it 60-40, or prevent a project that may be 70-30, I don't know. But that's my thoughts. I answer any questions that y'all have for me, or I can step down and somebody else can come back up and do that. I just feel like if we don't do something, the trajectory of we could lose the ability to use this tool, which would harm us more in the future than the present. So, okay, thanks.
I do a couple of comments I'd like to make. So, as I'm reading through this resolution, it says to interact with municipalities in an effort to understand how other communities utilize TIF, to educate the public at large on matters, and then also even talking about bringing in some experts. How long is it going to take to create a policy? Do we have a timeline on this? Because, we just had a developer come in, ask that we push this ahead of this TIF council. Well, we can't do that necessarily this evening, but is he going to wait 1 month? Is he going to wait 6 months before this policy is put in place? What is our time frame? Because if he's going to wait 6 months, my guess is he's probably not going to wait 6 months.
It's a good point, Frank. We haven't really established a timeline yet as far as what that policy looks like coming from that. I haven't heard of a timeline. I don't think we've had a chance to establish a timeline because the group hasn't sat down and discussed, obviously who these people look like, who's coming to present, how this is going. I think in the interim though, it's going to be really tough to hold back developers who want to move forward on their projects because we are getting a construction season and that's where we're at. So those are discussions we'll have to have, and those will be discussions open to the public, brought forth to us in front of a city council meeting. We'll have the opportunity to discuss that, but it will be kind of a dicey time between bringing your project forward and having a policy that comes forward that we can approve. So I think we kind of all realize that, because I do know that the construction window is tightening, obviously. Ultimately, if you're a developer, you probably wanted some things rolling before now, as far as your plat and final plat. But I don't know. I can't really answer some of those questions.
I guess maybe one of the questions I have is, are we going to entertain a TIF request prior to policy being established?
I guess that was one of my questions too. I do not read in this resolution anything saying that we're not going to entertain TIF financing for projects that come up. Really, this resolution, what I read on the items in here are educational items.
Right.
So the perception out there, which kind of floored me a little bit, that this is going to stop TIF, I think is inaccurate. I don't know why we would jump away from doing TIF as we have, but again, looking more at this, this is really an educational tool more than anything else. So, and correct me if I'm wrong. If something had occurred, October, November, early December, that said this is different. So,
Sorry, Councilman, I can touch on that a little bit. I think, and I'm speaking from my previous role when I was city administrator, but staff, as we're communicating with developers and there were projects coming forward, the subcommittee and even, official conversations and unofficial conversations with elected officials was to not accept new applications for developments until this committee gets worked out. At least that was the understanding, at least from my standpoint. I think Mr. Ramekers is one of those that had been, just hold off for now. So obviously if was not the intent, that is something that needs to be cleared out. So I appreciate that question being asked tonight, so that, I guess from my perspective in working with the development community and different developers that I'm in contact with as well, that's the question hanging out there that Councilman Arns just asked. So I think that clarity tonight is good, that you guys are all addressing that.
I'm going to agree with Jim on this. I think it's more of an educational. I don't think we were meaning to stop any projects coming forward. And I guess if anybody else has input on that, but that was my feeling as well as what Jim just said. I would repeat that, yes. Had somebody in the audience that wanted to come up.
Yeah, Roger Keeney, and I'm not against TIF. I'm not against it. I guess I need to know more about it. And I just want to say that I've got an open mind. I was changed the day they come in here with a police buyout. I was against that from first step to the door. I changed my mind then, and so I'm open. We'll see you.
Stephen Ramekers, Granville Custom Home. So I would just quickly point out to the city council that we'll call it the resolution that's in front of you, actually calls for the formation of a TIF council. There is no timeline for them to create their policy. So the ultimate end game of the TIF council is to create TIF policy. It's written in what you're asked to approve. And then the TIF policy would be presented to the city council, at which time the TIF council will dissolve. That is verbatim the language. So
Right, that's right.
you're gonna get a TIF policy that's been built over whatever period of time that takes, and then you will be asked to give it an up or a down. If you give it a down, there is no TIF policy. If you give it a thumbs up, there is a TIF policy, which has no amendment process, because the TIF council that created it immediately is disbanded. So you're gonna have iterations of this. I don't know what iteration 2 is gonna look like, because there's no council to go back, there's no TIF council to go back to that as a standing council to ask, hey, these circumstances came up, how did you mean this? Here's some certain pieces of the policy that are unclear, here's some things that we think probably weren't looked during the process. So there's gonna be a generation 2 and a generation 3, but there's not gonna be a TIF committee to answer those questions, right? So then you're gonna be left with a policy that you're probably gonna be married to, because it's not gonna have an amendment process to it. And if you don't follow it, then you're at risk of being called out for failing to follow your own policy. Is the policy advisory? Is the policy that needs to be adhered to like other policy? If you deviate from it, does that put somebody's approved TIF plan at risk of being appealed? Does it put the council at risk for approving something where the policy is not clear on whether it should be approved or not approved? So whether this is advisory or something of that nature, I just to be clear, it's not what's in front of you.
I thought you said in your previous life you were a lawyer.
Correct. I read it. I'm trying to be reformed, right? People like me a lot more since then. So yeah, it's not an educational tool. It's a TIF policy. It's going to be presented to this board, and this board's going to be married to it, or this board's going to reject it and have no policy. So just to be clear what your end game is. Again, I would like to not be involved in any of this, right? Norfolk is an autonomous, city in the state of Nebraska, can move forward as it sees best, but I just would like you to be aware that that's where the end game is on this policy as proposed.
I would disagree with that assessment respectfully. The goal is to educate and they're gonna come up with a policy, but we changed the language very specifically so that they did not have to decide whether or not to accept it. It says that they're gonna receive it, so they're gonna hear what the recommendation is, and as soon as they hear it, then it's automatically disbanded. The TIF council, the advisory council's automatically disbanded. They don't have to vote up or down on it. They're not tied to it at all. That was not the goal, because they cannot force the hand of the council. The council's gonna hear what the recommendation is based on the meetings and the experts and what they learn, and then the council will
So they would not be
choose.
asked to adopt the policy.
Well, I'm sure they might be. That doesn't mean that they have to. We did
Right.
not set it up that way. They do not have to
They could
vote on, they're
accept
gonna
it or
receive
reject
it.
Right?
They're gonna
Or
receive it.
just-
They're gonna
or just
hear
look-
it, or they
could just look at it.
Correct.
Okay.
They're gonna hear the recommendation based on, a group of citizens that learned a lot about TIF, and there were experts involved, and then they're going to give their feedback on what was learned throughout that process. There is no requirement that a formal policy is voted on.
Okay. I thought that's what it said, but I might be wrong.
I understand your concerns, but the original version of it said that it's disbanded as soon as the policy is adopted. This does not say that. It just says,
Oh.
once they've received their recommendations, the committee shall be automatically dissolved. So if you had seen an earlier version, that could be why you think that, but we wanted to make sure that the council's hand was not forced. They all want to hear the recommendations, and everybody's going to go through the process to learn and see what they give in terms of a policy recommendation, but no hands are going to be tied. That was my understanding. That was never the goal in putting this together. It was more of a collaborative, because there's so much negative press surrounding TIF and Norfolk's use of TIF. It was just so everybody could understand, and then this group with people with different opinions can offer recommendations, but ultimately this governing body will decide if they follow that or not.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Danny, so say this thing goes in the ditch and is not as advertised, and it's not being productive, and the council actually thinks it's hurting the TIF conversation. Does the council have authority? Can we create a resolution just saying we're done with this? It's not doing what we intended it to do. We don't want this to happen anymore.
Yes.
Do we have the authority to do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
So Danny, the way, based on what you just said, so make sure I have this right. So the council, or not the council, but the advisory committee will create a policy, and then they disband, and then every time something with TIF comes up in front of us, we're gonna refer back to our policy to see how it went against policy, and then decide whether, we don't have to follow the policy, like, it's not an ordinance or anything, we have to not follow it. We can just say, okay, this was according to the policy our advisory committee gave us, this doesn't fall within the policy, but that it has no binding effect on us as council, correct? Is that right? Is that right?
So unless the council would determine that they want to adopt it as formal policy, it would just be, you're gonna hear it as a recommendation. It's not gonna be formal policy unless the decision is made to adopt it as such. Now, it might be something where you refer back to it. Okay, the committee in June of 2025, when we looked at this is what they said. It might be something that you use informally as a mechanism for, looking at a proposal against what a group of, well-intentioned citizens provided you in terms of recommendations, but there's nothing in here requiring a formal policy, and I think there's a lot of questions, and it's an imperfect process because nobody else is doing it, and so we're doing the best. Everybody has good intentions, and if it's something ultimately as I see it, and I think as the mayor sees it, if you want this, if this committee works well together and it's something that you want to continue after this disbands, you could have another committee with the same citizens, or you could adopt it as formal policy, so it's something that you use as guide rails, or there's a lot of ways that we can craft it. I think the number, as we move forward with the input of these 12 members, 2 of which are here tonight as co-chairs, I think just the goal for right now, for the most of you, as I understand it, is to move forward in a way that incorporates citizens, so everybody feels heard, everybody feels like they understand TIF, and so there's some offering in terms of what TIF should look like, what they want it to look like. But this is not intended to be strict,
So this won't be a, like, every time something comes up with TIF, the committee gets
unless you
to-
want it to. If you
Okay.
wanted to, or it's something that a project comes before you and you say, I remember a year ago, we had a conversation around this. So it's used as a reference point.
Thank you.
Danny, that's where I was thinking of, the word policy seems to be the problem. Why wouldn't it be called like recommendations or guidelines that this committee would come up with that we use to?
Well, because I think ultimately the goal is a policy, is looking at, that's my understanding, is that the goal is a policy of, what do we want to use TIF for? What do we not want to use TIF for? How do we want to utilize this tool moving forward? But this does not require anybody to adopt it. If it's an informal, if it's something where they present it, it's not adopted as necessarily as formal policy, then I guess it would be more of a report that you look at. I don't know exactly how this is going to go. All I'm saying is the language of this does not bind anything that comes out of this committee at this time.
I would just, sorry, Jim, and I'll just one little bit. The way it was presented to me initially and how we came up with this, and I have no issue with this, of citizens having involvement and all of us learning in a different fashion, especially having new councilmen and old councilmen and every different aspect of every different ward. But the way it was brought to my attention, I felt was this would be recommendations that this committee would come up with, and we wouldn't be bound by that, which is what policy is stating. And so I somewhat disagree, where I don't think the intention was to ever come up with a solid policy, and this is what we're gonna follow no matter what, but it was more of a guideline that we would like to look at and follow, where there might be an oddity of whether that's industrial or residential or whatever it might be, or a mix of both, that we might have to go outside of that guideline by a little bit. Whatever that might be, who knows? I don't even know what a guideline is at this point. But that was my understanding from the beginning. Maybe Shane can answer that more.
A policy can be a guideline. In fact, that was my understanding, is we're creating guidelines. So a policy that you adopt, your policy might just be you're adopting guidelines, which are not hard and fast.
That's my thought process, was it was a guideline, because there's 20 different applications. There's probably more than that, different applications for TIF. You've got commercial, you've got residential, you've got R1, R3, R2, retail commercial, business commercial. So there is no exact science on yay, nay on what project goes forward and what doesn't. I think that the key was to create a guideline within the community, so that your voting members, who change every 2 years, have a feel for what our community wants to with. And some projects may fall outside of that, and then you're gonna have to look at it totally separately and totally differently.
And that's why I'm saying that if we're bound by a policy, it seems odd if you go outside of it.
Hy-Vee East has been brought up. Hy-Vee East is a whole different project compared to an R1 high-density residential project. And apartments are way different than so I think the guideline would be, and that's what I'm hoping comes from this, is there are some guidelines that go along with it to address some of the concerns that have been brought forth to us in the council meetings by citizens. And those guidelines can then help address some of those issues per development. And then we can, I think that makes it more palatable for our elected officials to go ahead and pass that, if they know that there's been a citizens group that has made some suggestions or guidelines, and we can either put those into that policy, not put those, because each one's gonna be different. And then it's still gotta come in front of us for approval, obviously, and with those guidelines in place or without those in place, you're gonna be reviewing and going through. But this, in my opinion, gives us an opportunity to work with the citizens and educate ourselves along with the public as we're moving forward, so.
That's what I envisioned bringing forward, was
Yeah.
really guidelines.
Yeah.
And then you guys determine whether those maintain guidelines, or you can determine whether you want to make them policy. That's up to you. But we were just going to bring forward some guidelines, and again, through that educational process, the whole community understands it, and then we create some guidelines. And we've got two sides of this committee. We've got people who are very adamant about use of TIF, and we've got those who are more conservative about the use of TIF, and so we're gonna hash all that out and try and come up with some guidelines, and maybe we're not successful in coming up with guidelines, but at least we've had an open conversation throughout the entire community to fully understand this and at least make an attempt at it.
Yeah, I agree. And you're all open-minded, right? Well, what, I guess maybe the mix of words between policy recommendations is, it's not a city ordinance.
Correct.
That's probably the right way of thinking about it then.
That's correct. That was never the goal, as I understand it, in drafting this resolution. That
Right,
wasn't
that
wasn't the goal.
It's appointed, it's a group that's created guidelines. Your council has to vote and enforce ordinances, so.
So this resolution that you have in there, could we actually remove the word policy and indicate guideline with that? Because policy does sound a little, you have it for one,
3 times? Okay,
number 12,
okay.
in any place else.
So do I hear, so it sounds like you would want a motion to replace in 3 spots the word policy and replace it with guidelines? Is that kind of?
More appropriate word, but yes. The second whereas.
Okay.
Paragraph 2E.
There's guidelines, we have another audience. Remember, I think that was that you, Candace? Did you say recommendations?
We can
Okay.
continue discussion before we make this motion, so.
Correct.
One last thing, you guys are the ones that set the policy, you guys are the ones that set we're just advising, we're giving you input from another point of view, is kind of the goal. Nobody's, I'm not elected, you guys have access to more information than we will. It's not our job to, as I understand it from the committee, to be deciding, firm decisions or setting something hard and rigid. It's just our input on maybe making a project a little more palatable or whatever. Not individual projects, just in general, to try to add that other point of view and take some contention out of this. You guys are the ones that ultimately decide. So if you set up a policy, you can take our guidelines and you guys can develop a policy if you so choose or whatever, or not. But that's how I.
Yeah, that was the intent.
Can I make one more clarification too? I would like it to be understood that we will not, or that we will entertain any TIF request that comes in prior to the recommendation that comes in. I don't think we should delay any TIF projects if they come forward.
Sorry, we go ahead, we can have discussion while we're entertaining a motion, so.
All right. Well, this really tells you how TIF fractions a community. But, excuse me, what you're voting on to serve in an advisory capacity. An advisor is someone that gives an input in their beliefs to a situation. That answers everything right there. I agree, TIF causes a lot of problems in the community after we've had some interesting situations lately. But what you're voting on, what I see up there, takes care of itself. They are to advise the council into the situations that are presented to them. And you're gonna have people that are totally against it, people that are for it, but they need to have their opinion heard. And that's why I think you guys are getting a little deep in the pond. It's up there. I think that's a good idea, what it says up there. It doesn't say they're creating policy, it doesn't say they're yay and nay. They're saying the majority of our committee agreed with this, the majority of our community didn't agree. They're advising you on the reasons why. End of subject.
Danny, I have one more quick question for you. Just to make sure, do we need to say anything in here about if we have 5 council members attending something, that there's no quorum issues with this, even though we're not voting? I mean, we wouldn't be voting, but is there quorum issues?
No.
If 5 or more are there?
No, because it'll follow the Open Meetings Act anyways. They're all going to be publicly advertised. So that's a really good question. Everybody can come. Everybody's encouraged to come and have that interaction. This is my understanding of what's intended. But that's why it's going to be very open, and they're all going to be public meetings. So that will not be an issue.
Brad Brooks, Mayor, City Council. I've listened to all this. The agenda says consideration of resolution up to scratch establishing a Citizens TIF Advisory Committee. From what Corey said, there supposedly is 12 members on this already. It's almost like you're trying to get the cart ahead of the horse. Let's be transparent about this. Can we find out who these 12 people are? You're asking to establish this committee. Sounds to me like it's already been established.
The names are in the enclosure, Brad.
The names are in.
So the list of names are in your enclosure to the agenda.
Well, that may very well be, and I can go back and look at that. But it's like it's already cut and dried. Now, I have nothing against TIF, and I'm all for citizens' input on this and whatever, but in the interest of transparency, let's get the thing straight. You're looking to approve this group tonight. And there's already 12 individuals. And I know beyond Corey and Jim, there's probably 10 other people, so.
I'm sorry, did I have 10 people in mind? I don't understand your question.
No, you said there was 12 individuals, and you asked for some of them to come up.
I did.
And talk.
I did.
So that tells me there's 12 individuals, and all I'm saying is Troy and Jim, obviously, being they've gone up here and the way they've expressed things, they're on it.
And that's explained on page 84 of the enclosure, or 84 of the document of the city council meeting, of that Troy and Jim both are co-chair, and how the nutrition of the other 10 were chosen. And that's on page 84 of the enclosure of 88.
Corey, I think Brad might have said Corey and Jim, and he actually meant Troy and Jim.
Okay.
Yeah, I meant Troy and Jim. I think when I said Corey, I was talking about the fact that Corey mentioned that there was 12 members. So, okay.
Okay. Where are we at here? So we've talked about a motion, correct?
Yes, so from what I understand, our first step will be a motion to, from what I've heard, a motion to amend the resolution by replacing all mentions of the word policy within the resolution with guideline.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I don't have a discussion, I just want to add one thing, that no matter what the questions were throughout this whole process, I think hopefully all of us, definitely I believe that the citizens, and I don't know if we have all 12 of them out here, but I do believe you all have the best intentions, and I do appreciate the involvement, no matter where that's at. Because I think being involved obviously makes us a better community, right? And I think we need more unification amongst all of us, especially around TIF, and this is one hell of a good start to it. So I think we can get some officials here, maybe from LARM, even Liz or something like that, that would definitely help out. But there's definitely things that are going to come out of this that all of us could benefit from. So thank you all. Thanks for coming here, and thanks for being a part of it.
So for now, we just need a vote on the amendment.
Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Yes, so now we'll go back and vote on the original consideration. As amended, correct. Yep. Do we have any discussion on that?
I just want to say, Shane, thank you for your leadership in it. It wasn't popular with some of the community, and you found a way to push it through and make it happen, so good job. Hopefully this helps our community, and like Granquist said, I believe everyone has good intentions. I believe this is going to put our community in a good light, not in a bad light. And I have faith that after this, we move together as a community to develop our community, invest in our community in a way that we all can agree with, or at least understand where people are coming from and move forward. So, thanks, Shane.
Any other discussion? All right, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2025-15 is adopted.
All right. On to item number 25, the regular agenda. Consideration approval of change order number 9F with United Contractors, Inc. for the First Street Bridge and in-street improvements project resulting in a net decrease of $323,570.87.
I'll make a motion for consideration of approval.
Second.
Okay. Steve will be providing the background for this.
Mayor and Council, before you is change order 9F on the First Street Bridge Roundabout Project with United Contractors. This being the final project would close out the project. The change order consists of about $233,570.87 of deduction in quantities of unit bid items throughout the project. In addition, there's $90,000 of liquidated damages assessed on the final change order. Again, approval of this change order does close out the project with United. There are a couple other projects related out there that are still active and to be closed out, but this closes out the larger one. So, any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. We did take this to subcommittee, in Public Infrastructure Subcommittee on March 10th and reviewed the change order with subcommittee, and they advised to move it forward to full council.
Any discussion on a net decrease?
Did you expect any?
Yeah. Right. Any members of the public want to address this net decrease? So, say that twice. You don't give me change orders like that. All right. Seeing none, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Well, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. And at this point in time, we'd like to open our meeting up to public comment period. Make sure, and when you come up, state your name and sign in so I don't have to interrupt you. And I believe we do, what's it? 5 minutes. It was what the allotted time is per comment. So If anybody wants to say anything, you're welcome to come up and speak to us now.
I'll be brief because I think you probably have been here longer than you thought you would be tonight. In 2024, Nebraska passed a statute requiring a public comment period at every meeting. Thus far, we've not been doing that. And so Shane, I know you campaign on transparency, so I'm asking if we're going to allow public comment at every meeting going forward.
This will be one of the topics on our council retreat. I have my own feelings on it. Obviously, we've discussed that before, where I think what public comment should look like. There are some other council people that have a difference of opinion on that, so I'm hoping to have some good discussion at the council retreat regarding this item. And after that, then we will let the public know where that goes. I had mentioned earlier to you, when you brought this up before, I was hoping we could do something at the beginning of the meetings for public comment, just do the public comment at the start. That way, people who want to state what they've got on their mind can state it and then go. They don't have to sit around for the rest of the meeting if they don't want to. But I have heard concerns from both in favor or against or whatnot from the rest of the council. I also, we were in the midst of, we've got a few other things that were going on, but at this point in time, it'll be on our agenda for that meeting, and we'll have an answer for you.
Okay,
Right
very
after
good.
that, so.
I just think that's critically important. With a public body and having the citizens have an opportunity to address the full council in a public meeting, I think that's critically important. Second thing I wanted to bring up was, at the last meeting, Corey Hildebrand brought up an idea of a multi-purpose piece of equipment to be used at Skyview Lake instead of the proposed mower. And I thought that was a great idea. I thought, gosh, why don't we entertain that? But as a more cost-effective solution. But it appeared as though that it didn't get any traction because we already went out for bids and the decision was already made. And again, that's because that happens in closed subcommittee meetings and that decision's already made. So I would just ask on those kind of decisions that somehow those come before and you consider a committee meeting of the whole so that we can entertain all those ideas and make the best decisions and the most cost-effective decisions for the community. Lastly, I just want to thank you for approving the TIF committee. The one thing was talked about in terms of bringing TIF projects forward, I would ask if there are any TIF projects brought forward prior to that, and even after that, that we don't meet in subcommittee to discuss blight and TIF. That those negotiations and discussions that happen behind closed doors, when you're talking about millions of dollars of property tax money, that those negotiations and those discussions happen in front of the full public. So I would ask that those discussions on blight and TIF happen in front of the full city council and in front of the public and not behind closed doors in subcommittee meetings. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Brad Brooks. Over the past 4 or 5 years, maybe longer, we've come up with the River Point District. We've made a lot of improvements, and I understand that there are individuals within the community that don't agree with it. But it's been a great tourism point for us to hang our hats on. And we've got grant money, we've improved Johnson's Park, we've got signage coming up, we've got the skating rink, but there's one spot over there that is, at least in my opinion, is a real eyesore. And I don't know who to go to, but it's the property on the west side of First Street across from Johnson's Park. Is there something that can be done to bring that up to code or appearance? Because in my estimation, that's a real eyesore. We've got people coming from all over the state. people out of state and they look at a bunch of brush. At least the trailers have been removed. But I mean, every time I drive by there, it just really sticks in my craw. And I don't know what can be done. I assume there's something that can be done, but I just want to bring it to everybody's opinion. I mean, we're looking to build on the community of Norfolk. I just read the other day that supposedly our population has dropped off a little bit. That's not the direction that we want to go in. So anything that anybody can do with the city to get that under control, to improve it, I highly applaud it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, Steve Seahide. I've been to a lot of city council meetings. I don't come to every one of them, but I need to compliment you. The ones since you became mayor, sitting up there, and the meetings I've came to, you genuinely show an interest in everybody and what they're saying. Like I said, I've been to a lot of city council meetings. I've been to one where previous mayor sat there and he basically got his butt chewed by a resident because he kept looking down and he just acted like he had no interest in what people were saying. So I just want to thank you for showing an interest.
Thank you. Eye contact and smile, right? Okay, anyone else have any thing? We can end on a compliment, maybe? All right, there we go. Meeting adjourned.